It was a busy evening, the kind when the sky is turning soft shades of orange and pink, and the streets are filled with cars returning home from work. The grocery store parking lot was crowded, every spot taken except for a few at the far end near the entrance. The air was filled with the familiar sounds of people unloading groceries, car doors slamming, and distant laughter. The smell of roasted coffee and warm bread drifted from the small cafe nearby. It was the kind of evening that felt ordinary, at first glance quiet, nothing out of the ordinary until a single decision turned it into something unforgettable. A man in his early 30s wearing a simple black hoodie and jeans drove slowly through the lot. He was a Navy SEAL, someone who had spent years under intense pressure, trained to stay calm even in life-and-death situations. But tonight, he was off duty. He was just a man who wanted to pick up a few items for dinner and head home. His mind was on the shopping list he had made earlier. Vegetables, some bread, maybe a sweet treat if the store had any fresh. He circled slowly, searching for a free spot, and finally at the very edge of the lot he saw one. A perfect spot near the entrance, empty and waiting. He signaled, ready to pull in. At the same time, a luxury SUV came rolling down the same lane. It slowed as if to park, and the couple inside glanced at the spot he was aiming for. They weren't smiling. Their expressions were sharp, almost like they were daring him to take it. The man and woman inside the SUV had clearly been looking for a spot, and when they saw him, a mix of irritation and something harsher, pride perhaps, or entitlement, showed on their faces. The SEAL noticed them but didn't say a word. He had seen situations like this before, not in parking lots but in life when someone's ego collided with reality. He could feel the tension building as he slowly inched toward the space, his hand steady on the wheel. The SUV's engine rumbled beside him, and the couple exchanged a glance, one that clearly meant they weren't going to back down. They got out of the car at the same time he finished pulling into the spot. Their movements were sharp, almost theatrical, like they were stepping into a confrontation they had already rehearsed in their heads. "Excuse me," the woman said, her tone sharp and cold. "We were here first." There was a subtle edge in her voice, the kind that makes it clear they didn't care about who was actually right or wrong. They just wanted to assert control. The SEAL took a deep breath. He had been trained to assess threats calmly, to read people quickly, to stay in control of his emotions no matter how heated things got. He lowered his voice, calm and steady. "Ma'am, sir, I didn't see you waiting. The spot was empty and I'm just parking." The man from the SUV stepped closer, chest out, voice raised now. "Don't give me that. You think you can just take what you want? We were here first. Move your car." A small group of people nearby began to notice the confrontation. Some slowed down as they walked past, glancing at the scene with curiosity. A man loading groceries into his car paused, frowning, while a teenager with a skateboard stopped to watch. The tension was growing like an invisible storm cloud over the parking lot. The SEAL's voice remained calm but firm. "There's no need to fight. The space was empty. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Let's just move on." The couple didn't move. Instead, the woman took a step closer, her voice rising, carrying words filled with aggression and something worse, something personal. "You have no idea who you're messing with. People like you don't belong here." The words hit harder than a shove, even though they were just speech. The SEAL's heart rate remained steady, his training kicking in, reminding him to stay composed. He had faced much worse situations in training, on missions where lives were on the line. This, though tense, was something he could manage. He kept his hands visible, palms open, as a sign of non-aggression. "I don't want trouble," he said calmly. "I'm just here to shop. You can park somewhere else if you like." But the couple didn't seem interested in logic or compromise. Their expressions hardened, their voices sharper. The man pointed at the spot with an accusatory finger, taking a step forward. "You think you can just take what you want, don't you? Think you can push people around?" The SEAL had learned to read body language. He noticed the tension in the man's shoulders, the slight twitch in his jaw, the way the woman's fingers curled slightly as if ready to strike. He noticed that, and he stayed calm. He didn't step back, he didn't raise his voice. He simply held his ground, breathing evenly, letting the couple make the first physical move if they were going to. And then they did. The man shoved the seal lightly, almost as if testing him. A small shove, but enough to send a clear message. This was a challenge. The seal's training kicked in. He didn't respond with aggression. He shifted his weight, blocked the shove effortlessly, and stayed in control. His eyes didn't leave, theirs steady and unwavering, a quiet warning that he wasn't someone to push around. The woman, seeing her partner's move, stepped forward and tried to push as well. The seal, without raising his voice, shifted sideways, letting her force slide off him. His movements were calm, precise, almost surgical. He wasn't trying to hurt them. He was just holding his space, making it clear he would not be intimidated. A few nearby bystanders began murmuring. Some looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene. A young couple with a baby stroller stopped, glancing nervously. The teenager with the skateboard began recording on their phone, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The seal, aware of the growing audience, stayed composed, never making sudden moves that could escalate the situation further. "You're lucky I don't call the cops right now," the man from the SUV said, his voice rising. "You think just because of your uniform or whatever, you can do what you want?" The seal shook his head slightly, calm but unwavering. "I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm just here to park and get my groceries. There's no need for this to get out of hand." But the couple wasn't listening to reason. They were wrapped up in their own anger, their own need to assert dominance. The woman stepped closer, speaking over him, her voice filled with venom. "People like you think you can just take whatever you want. Well, not today." A few more onlookers stopped, some whispering among themselves, some raising their phones to record. The energy in the parking lot had shifted. It was no longer just a simple disagreement over a parking spot. The situation had escalated into a tense confrontation, fueled by anger and prejudice. The seal's mind, however, was clear. He had faced tense situations before. He had been trained to stay calm under pressure, to assess threats, to protect himself while avoiding unnecessary conflict. His body remained relaxed, but ready. He knew that any sudden movement could escalate things further. He knew that patience and composure were his best tools. As the couple stepped forward again, he moved slightly to the side, not backing down, letting them see that he was not intimidated. He didn't raise his hands in aggression, but he held his stance firmly, a quiet strength that spoke louder than words. For a few seconds, time seemed to stretch. The hum of cars, the chatter of people, even the soft breeze seemed to fade into the background. All that mattered were the four people in that little square of parking lot space. The seal, calm and composed, and the couple, aggressive and full of misguided confidence. Then the woman took a step closer, reaching out to push him again. This time it was more than a test. The seal blocked her with a simple shift of his weight, steady and controlled, making it clear he would not allow himself to be pushed or intimidated. He could feel the tension in the air, the rising anger, the fear of losing control on the other side. Around them, a few people began to murmur more loudly, some shaking their heads, some whispering about the obvious unfairness of the situation. The young teen recording smiled slightly, as if sensing that justice and skill were about to show themselves. The seal's mind remained calm, focused. He had been trained to face danger without losing composure. He knew he could handle this, not with anger, but with presence, discipline, and patience. He wasn't here to humiliate anyone. He was here to protect himself and prevent escalation. And so the moment hung in the air, thick with tension. A simple parking spot had become a battlefield of pride, prejudice, and discipline. The seal stood, steady, calm, composed. The eye of the storm as the couple fumed in frustration and anger. Around them, the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next. As one man remained unshaken in the face of hate, teaching a quiet, powerful lesson simply by standing firm. The tension in the parking lot did not fade. Instead, it grew heavier, thicker, like the air itself had been charged with electricity. The seal stayed in his spot, calm and composed, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel as he took in the situation. Around him, a small crowd of onlookers had begun to gather, curious and unsettled. Some whispered to each other, trying to understand what was happening. Others pulled out their phones, capturing every moment, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The couple stood close, their faces flushed with frustration. The woman's eyes were sharp and filled with anger, while the man's jaw tightened with impatience. Their body language screamed that they were determined to assert themselves, to make the seal feel small, even though they had no real claim to the spot. Their aggression was fueled by more than just a parking dispute. It was personal, rooted in assumptions and prejudice that made them feel entitled to control the situation. "You think you can just do whatever you want?" the man said, stepping closer. His voice was louder now, trying to dominate the scene. "We've been waiting." "You don't get to just take things from people." The seal kept his voice steady, calm, and deliberate. "There's no need for this to escalate. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone. The spot was open. I just want to park and go inside." But reason and calm did little to penetrate the couple's anger. They had built a narrative in their minds, one where they were in the right and anyone who challenged them was wrong. They didn't pause to think about fairness, about patience, or about what was actually happening. All they felt was irritation, growing into aggression. The woman moved closer, gesturing sharply with her hands as she spoke. "You don't get it. People like you. You think you can just show up and take what's ours. Well, not today. Not here." Around them, the crowd of onlookers began to shift. Some frowned, shaking their heads. A man with groceries in his hands muttered under his breath, clearly annoyed at the couple's behavior. Another woman whispered to her friend, "Why are they acting like this? It's just a parking spot." A few teenagers laughed quietly, recording the scene, sensing that it might become something worth sharing. The seal remained calm, almost unnervingly so. He had faced worse, far worse. In his training, he had learned to control his breathing, to focus his mind, to stay grounded no matter the chaos around him. He didn't need to react with anger or aggression. He simply needed to hold his ground, to protect himself and to let the situation unfold naturally. The couple, however, were growing bolder. They didn't understand the man they were confronting. They didn't see the years of discipline, training, and resilience that underpinned his calm exterior. They only saw what they wanted to see. Someone they could intimidate, someone they could push into submission. The man stepped closer, waving his arms in frustration. "You think you can just park wherever you want? You have no right. Move your car now." The seal remained steady, his hands relaxed on the wheel. "I'm not moving. There's no need to get physical. Let's just calm down and avoid any trouble." The woman scoffed and took another step forward. Her tone grew sharper, dripping with condescension. "People like you don't belong here. You think just because of your uniform or whatever, you can take what you want. Well, think again." Her words carried weight not because they were true, but because they were meant to wound. They were meant to provoke fear, shame, and anger. But the seal's face remained calm, unreadable, a wall against their attempts to push him off balance. For a few moments, the three of them stood there in silence, the tension almost unbearable. The hum of car engines, the distant laughter, the shuffling of people in the lot, all of it faded into the background. What mattered was the standoff, the silent battle of wills. The seal's calm presence contrasted sharply with the couple's agitation, and the difference was striking to anyone watching. The woman suddenly stepped even closer, trying to assert dominance physically. Her hand brushed against the seal's arm lightly, a testing touch almost like a challenge. The seal shifted slightly, not aggressively, but enough to block her movement. He didn't push her away with force. He simply moved with precision, letting her feel that her attempt to intimidate him had no effect. The man, noticing this, grew more frustrated. He leaned forward, gesturing wildly, trying to assert control. "You think you can just ignore us? You don't get it." The seal's mind remained focused. He knew that reacting with anger would only escalate the situation. He had learned to stay calm, to read people, and to control the environment around him as much as possible. He breathed slowly, deliberately, keeping his body relaxed but ready. Around them, the crowd continued to watch. Some whispered among themselves, expressing disbelief at the couple's behavior. Others held their phones, recording the scene as it unfolded. The seal didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't allow the aggression to penetrate his composure. He was like a calm center in a storm, unmoving and steady. Then the man reached out, shoving the seal lightly. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to signal a challenge. The seal responded with perfect control, shifting his weight and blocking the movement without retaliating. He didn't strike back. He didn't escalate. He simply remained steady, showing that he would not be moved. The woman, seeing her partner's attempt, pushed as well, her fingers brushing against the SEAL's arm. Again, he shifted calmly, precise, controlled. His movements were so subtle that a casual observer might not even notice. But to anyone watching closely, it was clear that he was in full control, that his body and mind were aligned in perfect discipline. A few people in the crowd began to murmur, expressing their disapproval of the couple's behavior. One woman shook her head, muttering, "This is ridiculous. It's just a parking spot." A young man raised his phone, recording while whispering to his friend, "They're going too far." He's not even reacting. The SEAL didn't care about the cameras or the murmurs. His focus was on maintaining control, on preventing escalation, on keeping the situation safe for everyone involved. He knew that a single wrong move could turn the situation violent, and he wasn't going to allow that. The couple, frustrated by their inability to intimidate him, began to raise their voices. Their words became sharper, more cutting, filled with anger and prejudice. They insulted him, not just over the parking spot, but in ways that cut deeper, attacking his identity, his presence, his very being. "You think you can just show up here?" the woman shouted. "You don't belong in places like this. People like you aren't welcome." The SEAL remained calm. He didn't respond with anger. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, letting their words pass over him like water over stone. He understood that reacting emotionally would only feed their aggression. Staying calm was the strongest response he could offer. A few more people had stopped to watch. A young couple with a stroller whispered to each other, shaking their heads. A man with a grocery cart muttered angrily, "What is wrong with these people?" The energy in the lot had shifted. This was no longer a simple parking dispute. It was a confrontation that revealed the couple's aggression, their prejudice, and their inability to respect others. The SEAL's body remained relaxed, but ready. He didn't need to make any sudden moves. He didn't need to escalate. He simply held his ground, letting his presence communicate strength, discipline, and control. Every person watching could feel it. The difference between someone reacting with anger and someone reacting with calm authority. Then the woman took another step forward, gesturing sharply. "You think you're better than us?" she demanded. "You think you can just push people around?" The SEAL shook his head slightly, still calm. "I'm not better than anyone. I'm just not going to fight over a parking spot. Let's all calm down." Her frustration grew. She couldn't understand why her aggression wasn't working. She couldn't comprehend why he wasn't reacting the way she expected. She had assumed he would get angry, that he would lash out, that he would give them the satisfaction of a fight. But he didn't. He stayed calm. He stayed composed. And that more than anything seemed to confuse and unsettle her. The man leaned forward, anger written across his face. "You think just because you're some kind of military guy you can ignore us? You don't get it. Move your car." The SEAL stayed calm. His eyes met theirs steadily, without anger, without fear. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held his ground, letting them know silently but clearly that he would not be moved. The tension hung in the air, heavy and thick. The crowd watched silently, sensing the quiet power of his discipline. The couple's frustration grew, but the SEAL's calm presence remained unshaken. In that moment, the parking lot felt like the stage for a silent lesson about control, discipline, and the power of staying calm in the face of aggression. And so the scene remained, frozen in that delicate balance, the SEAL, calm, composed, and fully in control. The couple, frustrated, angry, and increasingly desperate to assert dominance, and the crowd watching, learning, and waiting for what would happen next in a story that was no longer just about a parking spot, but about patience, discipline, and the quiet strength of a man who refused to be intimidated. The tension in the parking lot reached a new level. The couple, frustrated that their words and gestures were having no effect, started to grow reckless. Their anger boiled over and their movements became sharper, more aggressive. They had expected the SEAL to flinch, to step back, maybe even to argue or raise his voice. Instead, he remained calm, his eyes steady, his posture relaxed but alert. That calm, unshakable presence only seemed to fuel their anger further. The man shoved lightly again, testing his strength, testing boundaries. The SEAL absorbed the shove easily, shifting his weight to maintain balance. He didn't retaliate. He didn't even raise his hands in anger. He simply stayed calm, standing firm, ready to react only if necessary. The shove was a message. We will push you and you will react. But the seal's response sent a message back, silent and clear. I will not be moved. The woman, noticing her partner's frustration, stepped forward and tried to push as well. The seal leaned slightly, redirecting the force without striking. His movements were precise, controlled, and non-violent. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted to stop the aggression without escalating it. Every bystander who had been watching the scene unfold could see the difference between raw anger and trained discipline. A few people in the parking lot began to murmur louder. Some shook their heads in disbelief, unable to comprehend why the couple was acting so aggressively over a parking spot. One woman whispered to her friend, "It's just a space. Why can't they just move on?" A young man nearby, phone in hand, was recording everything, clearly sensing that something bigger than a parking dispute was happening. The man, frustrated and embarrassed that the seal remained calm, reached for him aggressively, trying to intimidate him physically. The seal shifted with perfect timing, dodging the movement and maintaining a protective stance. His eyes were calm but alert, scanning for the next move, ready to react with precision if the situation escalated further. He did not want a fight, but he knew he could defend himself if necessary. The woman, seeing her partner's growing frustration, tried to push again. This time she moved with more force. The seal stepped to the side, allowing her push to slide off him harmlessly. He kept his hands low, open, signaling non-aggression, but his body was ready to respond if needed. He was calm, collected, and in control. The couple's behavior had begun attracting more attention. People nearby started slowing down, watching, whispering, even recording on their phones. Some were curious, some were worried, and some were clearly angry at the couple's actions. One man loading groceries muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable. Just for a parking spot." The seal's mind remained clear, focused on keeping himself safe and preventing escalation. He understood human behavior. He knew that reacting with anger would only fuel their aggression. He stayed calm, breathing steadily, keeping his body relaxed but ready. Every movement he made was deliberate, precise, and controlled. The couple, growing desperate, started shouting. Their words were sharp, filled with prejudice and insults. They didn't care about fairness or logic. They only wanted to assert dominance. "You don't belong here," the woman shouted. "People like you think they can do whatever they want." The seal did not respond with anger. He didn't argue. He simply remained calm, letting their words roll off him. He was not there to win a verbal battle. He was there to protect himself and maintain control. His presence alone spoke volumes, a quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. The man shoved the seal harder this time, his frustration boiling over. But the seal was ready. He shifted his weight, absorbed the force, and maintained his stance. He did not strike back. He did not raise his voice. He simply stayed calm, demonstrating control and discipline that the couple could not match. A few bystanders began whispering, impressed by the seal's restraint. Some muttered about how they would have reacted with anger. Others shook their heads, recognizing the danger the seal was avoiding by staying composed. The energy in the parking lot was electric, charged with tension and anticipation, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. The woman tried to push again, this time more aggressively. The seal moved to the side, using his body to redirect her force without causing harm. His movements were smooth, controlled, and almost invisible in their precision. He was not trying to hurt anyone. He simply wanted to de-escalate the situation while keeping himself safe. The man, growing more agitated, stepped forward with a raised hand, ready to strike. The seal remained calm, his eyes focused, body ready. He shifted slightly, deflecting the movement and maintaining balance. The couple was clearly frustrated. They had expected fear, anger, or resistance, but not calm, unwavering discipline. Their aggression was being met with controlled patience, and it confused them, making them even angrier. The crowd around them grew. People whispered, some recording on their phones, some shaking their heads. One teenager muttered, "They don't realize who they're messing with." A woman nearby whispered, "I can't believe this. He's doing nothing wrong and they're attacking him." The seal's mind remained focused on the present. He did not think about retaliation. He did not think about anger. He only thought about staying calm, staying safe and preventing the situation from escalating. Every movement he made was deliberate, precise, and controlled. He was a trained professional, and his years of experience were evident in every action. The couple, desperate to assert dominance, tried again. This time the man lunged, attempting to grab the seal's arm. The seal shifted smoothly, avoiding the grab and maintaining his balance. He did not retaliate, did not strike, did not raise his voice. He simply stayed calm, demonstrating control and discipline that the couple could not match. The woman, seeing her partner fail, stepped forward aggressively. The seal moved slightly, redirecting her force and maintaining a defensive stance. His movements were precise, controlled, and almost effortless. He was not trying to hurt anyone. He was simply protecting himself and preventing escalation. The crowd continued to grow, sensing the intensity of the confrontation. Some people whispered in awe at the seal's discipline. Others shook their heads, frustrated at the couple's behavior. One man muttered, "If I were him, I'd have lost my temper by now." The seal remained calm. He knew that the couple's aggression was fueled by anger and prejudice. He did not allow their words or actions to affect him. He remained composed, focused, and in control. His calm presence was a silent lesson in discipline and restraint. The man, growing more desperate, lunged again, trying to push the seal. The seal shifted effortlessly, maintaining balance and control. The woman tried to intervene, but the seal's movements were precise, redirecting her force without causing harm. The crowd whispered among themselves, impressed by the seal's restraint. One woman muttered, "He's not even fighting back. That's incredible." Another teenager whispered, "He could crush them if he wanted, but he's not." The seal's focus remained unshaken. He did not react with anger or aggression. He did not escalate the situation. He simply remained calm, disciplined, and in control. Every movement, every breath, every gesture was deliberate and precise. The couple, frustrated by their inability to provoke a reaction, became more aggressive. Their shoves grew stronger, their words sharper, their frustration more obvious. But the seal remained calm, steady, and composed. He did not allow their aggression to affect him. Finally, after several tense moments, the woman stepped back slightly, realizing that her attempts to intimidate him were failing. The man, still frustrated, paused, breathing heavily. The seal remained calm, his eyes steady, his posture relaxed but alert. Around them, the crowd began to murmur, some nodding in approval, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The energy in the parking lot remained tense, charged with anticipation. Everyone was waiting, wondering what would happen next. The seal's calm presence remained the center of the storm. He had faced aggression, anger, and prejudice, and he had remained composed. He had not retaliated, not struck, not yelled. He had simply stayed calm, disciplined, and in control. And in doing so, he had sent a silent message. He would not be intimidated. The couple, frustrated and exhausted, began to realize that their aggression was futile. They had underestimated him, assuming he would react with anger or fear. But he had remained calm, controlled, and disciplined, demonstrating a quiet strength that they could not match. The parking lot, once filled with ordinary sounds and smells, now felt like the stage for a silent lesson. The seal, calm and composed, had shown that true strength was not in anger or aggression, but in discipline, patience, and self-control. The couple, defeated by their own frustration, finally stepped back, their anger giving way to embarrassment. The crowd watched in awe, realizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not a fight, not a victory, but a lesson in calm strength, discipline, and the power of staying composed in the face of aggression. And so the scene remained, charged with tension, but controlled. The seal, calm and disciplined, had prevented escalation. The couple, frustrated and humbled, had learned that aggression could not overpower quiet strength. The parking lot, filled with ordinary people, had witnessed something extraordinary. After several minutes of tense confrontation, the couple finally seemed to realize that their aggression was having no effect. Their frustration had grown to visible levels, their faces red, voices hoarse from shouting, and hands trembling slightly from the intensity of the moment. They stepped back slightly, glancing at each other as if questioning what to do next. The seal remained calm, his body still relaxed but ready, every muscle poised to react if necessary. though he had no intention of escalating further. The surrounding crowd had grown. A few people had parked nearby, drawn by the commotion. Others, passing through the lot, slowed their cars and peeked to see what was happening. Some held their phones out, capturing the unfolding story. Whispers filled the air. "It's just a parking spot," one person murmured. "I can't believe they're making such a scene," said another. The energy was a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and admiration for the SEAL's calm composure. The couple's SUV sat idly in the lot, the engine humming softly. They were now debating quietly among themselves, though their whispers were sharp and urgent. The man kept glancing at the SEAL, irritation etched across his features. The woman kept gesturing wildly, clearly frustrated that nothing seemed to be going according to their plan. They had expected fear, anger, or some form of submission, but none of it came. Instead, they were met with quiet confidence, patience, and control. After a moment, the man muttered something under his breath and gestured toward their SUV. They appeared to be readying to leave the parking lot, though their movements were slow and clumsy, still fueled by embarrassment and lingering anger. The SEAL watched, calm and observant, knowing that their actions might continue to cause tension, but confident that he could handle whatever came next without resorting to aggression. As the couple moved toward their vehicle, a subtle sense of inevitability began to settle in the air. A few bystanders whispered among themselves, noticing a slight shift. The SEAL's focus, however, remained entirely on maintaining awareness. He scanned the lot calmly, noting the positions of other vehicles, the paths the SUV might take, and the potential hazards around them. He didn't need to intervene yet, but he was prepared for anything. The couple climbed into their SUV, still muttering to each other. The man's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, while the woman continued to gesture angrily toward the SEAL, clearly still trying to assert some form of dominance even as they prepared to leave. Their vehicle rumbled as the engine started, and the tires rolled slowly across the pavement. Then, unexpectedly, something shifted. As the SUV began to move, the driver misjudged the distance to a parked car nearby. A loud crunch filled the air as the front bumper of the SUV collided with the other vehicle. The impact was minor, but the sound alone drew immediate attention. The couple froze, the man's jaw tightening as he realized what had happened. The woman gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. The crowd, which had been watching quietly, erupted with murmurs and whispers. "Karma," one person muttered under their breath. "Serves them right," said another. Phones clicked and cameras flashed as bystanders captured the moment. The couple scrambled to assess the damage, peering at the bumper and frowning at the small dent and scratches left behind. The SEAL observed calmly, his expression neutral, but his presence commanding. He didn't smile or gloat. He didn't even move. He simply watched as the couple dealt with the immediate consequences of their own actions. They had tried to assert dominance through aggression and prejudice, and now they faced an unexpected result of their own choices. The man stepped out of the SUV, muttering angrily, clearly frustrated and embarrassed. The woman followed, her hands shaking slightly as she gestured toward the damage. A few people in the crowd couldn't help but comment. "Maybe now they'll learn," whispered a bystander. Another person shook their head, saying, "All that anger for nothing. How ironic." The couple tried to exchange words with the owner of the other vehicle, but the tone was awkward and defensive. Their voices carried the same frustration as before, but now mixed with embarrassment and confusion. They had expected control and compliance from others, but instead, they were confronted with an inconvenient truth. Actions fueled by aggression often backfire. Meanwhile, the SEAL stood calmly, observing from a short distance. He remained composed, aware of the crowd and the dynamics around him. He didn't need to intervene. The situation had naturally shifted in a way that reinforced his earlier discipline and restraint. He had faced hostility and intimidation with patience, and now he saw the natural consequence of the couple's actions unfold without interference. A security guard arrived shortly afterward, alerted by the commotion and the minor collision. The guard walked briskly to the scene, assessing the situation. He spoke to the couple about the collision, taking notes and asking questions. The man and woman responded defensively, clearly still angry but now facing tangible consequences for their reckless behavior. The guard's presence added another layer of accountability, reminding the couple that actions have consequences beyond their immediate perceptions. Bystanders continued to watch, some whispering about the irony of the situation. They were so sure of themselves, one person said, shaking their head. And now look at them. Phones were still raised, capturing the scene from multiple angles, each recording preserving the story of arrogance meeting consequence. The SEAL remained calm throughout. He didn't move closer or comment. He didn't need to. His presence alone communicated the lesson he had already taught through restraint and discipline. People around him noticed the contrast. He had faced aggression without responding with anger, and now the couple's reckless choices had created their own problems. The couple, still flustered, tried to maneuver the SUV carefully to avoid further collisions. But the tension was palpable. They argued quietly, their frustration evident in every gesture. The woman's hands were raised, the man's jaw clenched. They were caught between their desire to leave the scene and their embarrassment over the minor damage they had caused themselves. Nearby, a few bystanders quietly commented on what they had witnessed. "That man didn't even touch them," whispered one woman. "He stayed calm the whole time, incredible." A young man nodded, adding, "All that aggression and they end up with a dent in their car. Shows you can't control everything by anger." The SEAL, meanwhile, continued to observe, maintaining his calm demeanor. He had proven something more important than just handling aggression. He had demonstrated that discipline, patience, and restraint can prevent escalation while letting natural consequences reveal themselves. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood, composed and alert, witnessing the outcome of a situation handled with wisdom rather than force. Eventually, the couple managed to navigate their SUV out of the immediate area, still muttering and clearly shaken. Their departure was slow, cautious, and awkward, marked by embarrassment and frustration. The crowd, now more relaxed, began to disperse, but the whispers of what had just happened lingered in the air. People continued to talk quietly among themselves, reflecting on the lesson they had seen. Aggression and prejudice often create consequences far beyond what one anticipates. The SEAL finally turned toward the grocery store entrance. Still calm, still collected, he walked slowly toward the doors, carrying his shopping list and a quiet sense of satisfaction. Not from revenge, not from triumph, but from the knowledge that he had handled a tense, potentially dangerous situation with discipline and control. The minor chaos in the parking lot had resolved itself without his needing to escalate. He had faced aggression, intimidation, and prejudice, and he had come through unharmed, composed, and respected by those who had watched. Inside the store, the SEAL moved among the aisles with quiet focus. He selected his groceries methodically, checking each item carefully but without hurry. He didn't dwell on what had happened outside. He simply continued with his evening, maintaining the same calm and composed mindset that had carried him through the confrontation. Meanwhile, outside, the parking lot slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Cars moved in and out, people loaded groceries, and the noise of the evening resumed. The couple's SUV had left the scene, still bearing the minor damage that reflected their own reckless behavior. The murmurs of bystanders lingered, some shaking their heads, some reflecting silently on the lesson they had witnessed. The SEAL finished his shopping, paying quietly at the counter. His demeanor was calm, collected, and unshaken. No one around him could see the tension he had faced moments earlier. He carried himself with the quiet strength of someone who had faced hostility and handled it without losing control, letting natural consequences reveal themselves without interference. As he walked back to his car, grocery bags in hand, he noticed a few people outside still talking quietly about the incident. Phones were raised, capturing final clips, and whispers of admiration for his composure floated across the lot. The couple's reckless behavior had left its mark, not just on their car, but on everyone who had witnessed the event. It was a quiet, powerful lesson in discipline, patience, and the consequences of unchecked aggression. The SEAL loaded his groceries into the car, secured the doors, and sat behind the wheel. He didn't rush. He didn't dwell on anger or frustration. He started the engine, ready to leave. Carrying the calm and discipline that had guided him through the entire confrontation, he knew that true strength was not measured by anger or retaliation, but by patience, control, and the ability to let consequences unfold naturally. The parking lot, once a place of tension and conflict, was now quiet. The couple's SUV had left, bearing the results of their reckless choices. Bystanders were dispersing, reflecting on what they had witnessed. And the SEAL, calm and composed, drove away, leaving behind a scene that had quietly demonstrated the power of discipline, patience, and letting karma work in its own way. The SEAL drove slowly through the streets after leaving the parking lot, his mind still clear and focused despite the tension he had just faced. He felt no anger toward the couple, no need for revenge. What mattered to him was staying calm, staying disciplined, and letting the events speak for themselves. He reflected quietly on what had just happened, thinking about how easily a simple parking dispute had escalated into a tense, dangerous situation. He parked his car near his apartment complex, careful to maneuver around other vehicles. But even as he stepped out, his presence remained calm and composed. He carried his groceries in a neat bag, moving with a sense of purpose and steadiness. Nothing about his demeanor suggested the confrontation he had endured moments earlier. He had faced aggression, prejudice, and intimidation, yet he had remained unshaken. Back in the parking lot where the incident had occurred, the couple was still dealing with the consequences of their actions. Their SUV had a minor dent from the collision, a small but tangible reminder of how reckless behavior can backfire. They argued quietly but angrily, blaming each other for the mistake while still nursing the frustration of the failed attempt to intimidate the SEAL. Their arrogance had turned into embarrassment, their aggression into regret. A few bystanders lingered, discussing the event with hushed voices. Some had watched the whole confrontation unfold from start to finish. One person said quietly, "I've never seen someone stay that calm in the face of so much aggression. Incredible." Another added, "They got exactly what they deserved, but without him even lifting a finger." The murmurs spread quietly across the lot, and the story began to take shape in the minds of those who had witnessed it. News of the incident started spreading quickly among the nearby neighborhood. Some people shared the video clips on social media, highlighting the irony of the situation. A couple full of anger and prejudice had tried to assert dominance over someone who didn't even respond with hostility, only to face a minor but humiliating consequence. The SEAL's calm restraint became the highlight, and many people praised his discipline and ability to handle a tense situation without losing control. Later that evening, the SEAL returned home. He unpacked his groceries carefully, placing each item neatly on the counter. He took a moment to reflect, thinking about how the situation could have gone differently if he had allowed anger or fear to guide his actions. In his line of work, discipline wasn't just a principle, it was a way of life. And today, he had applied it not in a mission or training exercise, but in a real-world confrontation that could have escalated into something far more serious. As he sat down with a cup of tea, he thought about the couple and their actions. He didn't feel hatred or resentment. He understood that their behavior came from a place of ignorance and entitlement, fueled by prejudice and frustration. Their actions were a reflection of who they were, not of him. And yet the natural consequences of their choices had already begun to teach them a lesson. Sometimes, he thought, life handles things better than any confrontation or argument ever could. Meanwhile, word of the parking lot incident continued to spread. Videos shared online showed the SEAL's calm demeanor and the couple's aggressive behavior. People commented on the irony, the natural consequences, and the SEAL's remarkable self-control. Some called it karma, others called it a lesson in discipline, but everyone who saw it understood one thing clearly. Aggression and prejudice rarely end well when met with calm and composure. The couple, now dealing with the minor damage to their car, had to exchange information with the other driver and with the security guard who had been called to the scene. Their frustration was evident. They muttered to each other angrily, their arrogance replaced with embarrassment. They had expected to dominate, to intimidate, to control the situation, and yet everything had gone wrong. Their actions had consequences, and there was no one else to blame but themselves. The SEAL, however, had moved on. He didn't need recognition or praise. He didn't need anyone to acknowledge what had happened. His focus was on calmness, discipline, and reflection. He understood that true strength was not measured by how much force you could exert, but by how well you could control yourself in the face of hostility. That lesson, he thought, was far more important than any temporary satisfaction from retaliation. That night, as he prepared for bed, he thought about the simple truth of what had occurred. A parking spot, something so ordinary, had become the setting for a confrontation filled with anger, prejudice, and aggression. And yet, through calm, patience, and discipline, the situation had been resolved without violence. The couple had faced the consequences of their own behavior, and he had faced the challenge with composure and strength. The SEAL knew that life would always present situations where others acted out of anger, ignorance, or prejudice. He also knew that the way he responded mattered far more than the provocations themselves. Today had been a lesson, a demonstration not of power, but of restraint, patience, and the natural consequences that come from reckless actions. As days passed, the incident continued to be discussed in the neighborhood and online. Many praised the SEAL's calm handling of aggression, and the couple's behavior became a cautionary tale about how arrogance, aggression, and prejudice can quickly backfire. People reflected on the story, talking about how restraint and patience often yield better outcomes than retaliation or anger. The SEAL's actions had shown that discipline could prevent escalation and allow consequences to reveal themselves naturally. He went about his life quietly, shopping, exercising, and maintaining his routines. He didn't dwell on the incident, but he carried with him the satisfaction of knowing that he had acted with integrity and control. The lesson wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about discipline, patience, and letting the natural consequences of others' actions play out. Meanwhile, the couple had to deal with the practical fallout of their aggression. The minor collision required insurance claims and awkward conversations. Their frustration continued to linger, but it was now tempered by embarrassment and the recognition that their own actions had created the problems they faced. They could not blame anyone else. The situation had exposed their aggression and prejudice, and the small dent in their car was a reminder of how their choices had consequences. The SEAL, in contrast, became an example to those who had witnessed him. People admired his calm presence, his restraint, and his ability to handle aggression without losing composure. Children, teenagers, and adults who had been nearby spoke quietly about what they had seen, internalizing the lesson of patience and self-control. The story spread not as a tale of violence, but as a demonstration of quiet strength and discipline. As weeks passed, the SEAL continued his life, returning to his daily routines with the same focus and composure he had demonstrated during the confrontation. He reflected often on the incident, not with anger or frustration, but with gratitude that he had managed to maintain control and allow the natural consequences to unfold. The lesson had been clear. Aggression and prejudice often carry their own penalties, and responding with calm and discipline can prevent escalation while allowing those consequences to teach their own lessons. The neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Cars moved in and out of the lot. People shopped, and the sounds of daily life filled the air. Yet the story lingered, carried in whispers, videos, and quiet reflections. The SEAL's actions became a reminder that strength is measured not by force but by restraint, that courage is often shown not in confrontation, but in calm composure, and that sometimes the best justice is letting consequences reveal themselves naturally. The couple eventually moved past the incident, though the memory remained. The minor damage to their vehicle was repaired, and they continued with their lives, perhaps a little more aware that aggression and prejudice could have unexpected outcomes. The lesson was subtle but lasting, a quiet reminder of how quickly arrogance and hostility can backfire. The SEAL, meanwhile, carried on. He went back to his workouts, his routines, and his daily life. He shopped, cooked, and rested. He lived with the knowledge that he had handled a tense, potentially dangerous situation with skill and restraint. He did not need recognition, but those who had witnessed him or seen the videos knew what they had seen. A man who faced aggression and prejudice with calm, patience, and discipline. In the end, the story was not about the confrontation itself, but about the lesson it taught. The SEAL had demonstrated the power of composure, the value of discipline, and the importance of letting natural consequences play out. The couple had experienced the minor repercussions of their own actions. The bystanders had learned the quiet strength of patience and restraint. And the neighborhood, for a brief moment, had witnessed a demonstration of true character, not through force but through calm control. The SEAL reflected on the events often. He thought about how easy it could have been to escalate, to react with anger, or to let frustration guide his actions. But he had chosen differently. He had stayed calm. He had stayed disciplined. And in doing so, he had proven something far more important than physical strength or dominance. He had shown the quiet power of self-control, patience, and integrity, and that in the end was the true victory. Not humiliation, not revenge, not anger, but calm, composed strength, and the knowledge that actions have consequences, and that discipline can guide those consequences in ways that no aggression ever could.